This story comes from my friend. She's been a subscriber for many years, and she was also a childhood friend of mine. So we kind of grew up together. She finally works up the courage to tell me this story after all these years.
Wow.
I was staying over at her house because I was in town visiting family. We were going through some old things in her basement. As you know, basements are always filled with lots of dusty, cobwebby stuff, boxes of old photos and forgotten toys. It's like a time capsule of your life. And that's exactly what we were doing, reminiscing about our childhood while rummaging through all of this old stuff. One of the things we came across was an old wooden doll. It was at least 4 feet tall, maybe even taller. Its face was painted a ghastly white. The detail was so intricate it looked almost human-like. And its dark eyes seemed to stare directly into your soul. It had long flowing black hair that reached down to its waist and was dressed in a Victorian nightgown. We were both creeped out just looking at it because it kind of had a creepy vibe to it. It didn't help that the basement was freezing cold and the only light came from a single bare bulb hanging precariously from the ceiling. Casting long, menacing shadows around the room, I told her, you know, if this doll could move and come alive, I'm pretty sure it would kill us. She laughed and said, yeah, right. But there was a mischievous glint in her eye. And then she did something that really freaked me out. She stared directly at the doll and said, hey doll, if you want to play with us, you can come out whenever you're ready. Was she crazy or what? Because this is one of those classic horror movie tropes. You know, the one where someone says, oh hey, ghost, come out anytime you want. Or, hey, demon, come out if you're here. And of course, the ghost or demon obliges and kills them. But still, I didn't want to be the one to call the Ghostbuster. She went back to rummaging through boxes of old stuff, and I tried to shake off the creepiness of the doll. Maybe it was just the dim oil lamp lighting or the dust particles dancing in the air that was getting to me. Or maybe it was the fact that I've watched too many horror movies and read too many ghost stories. But I was starting to feel uneasy. It was at that moment that the doll suddenly jerked violently, like someone had just stuck a fork in its socket. We both jumped and stared at it in disbelief. Its head whipped around and its eyes, which before we thought were painted on, were now wide open and staring straight at us. I started to scream and run for the stairs, but my friend just stood there frozen in fear. And then the doll started to move. Slowly at first it took a step forward, then another and another, until it was standing and walking towards us. Its feet hitting the concrete floor with a heavy thud that echoed in the vast emptiness of the basement. Turned and sprinted up the stairs, not daring to look back. The sound of its dragging feet and my own ragged breathing echoed in my ears. I burst through the front door and stumbled onto the lawn. I could hear my friend screaming my name and then silence. I don't know how long I stayed out there, on the lawn, but eventually the sun came up and the image of the doll burned itself into my retinas. I knew I had to go back down those stairs. I had to check on my friend. But when I turned the doorknob and walked inside, the doll was gone. And there was my friend sitting on the floor in the corner, crying and hugging a blanket to her body. I rushed to her side and asked what had happened. She looked up at me with tear-filled eyes and whispered, I think it killed me. I could see scratches on her arms and neck and they were bleeding. What happened? I asked. Then she told me that when I ran out of the basement, she must have blacked out or something because the next thing she remembered was waking up on the floor with scratches all over her body and the doll nowhere to be found. We both searched the house frantically, but the doll was nowhere to be seen. Finally, we decided to check the basement again. As we descended the stairs, I felt a sudden chill, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. There was my friend's doll sitting in the corner, its head turned at an unnatural angle, and its eyes gleaming in the darkness. It was then that we noticed something strange. Scratched into the wooden floorboards around the doll were the words, "Don't ever leave me again." My friend and I screamed and ran away. We never went back to her house. And to this day, we have no idea what that doll was or where it came from. I tried researching old Victorian dolls online but couldn't find anything that matched the description. My friend swore that she never played with any creepy dolls like that when she was younger, and her parents confirmed that. So where did the doll come from? And why did it scratch up my friend? Was it trying to communicate with us somehow? Or was it just plain evil? This paranormal event changed both of our lives forever. It made us question everything we thought we knew about the world. And it left us with scars, both physical and emotional, that will never fully heal. But I'm not the only one who has experienced something like this. There are countless stories of haunted dolls that have come to life and wreaked havoc on their owners. For example, there's the story of Robert the doll. Robert is a 4-foot-tall doll that is said to be possessed by the spirit of a young boy. He was originally owned by a couple in the 1920s, and they soon realized that he was no ordinary doll. He would move around on his own, shake people's hands, and even speak to them in a creepy voice. When they tried to get rid of him, he began to terrorize their new owner, so they took him to a church for an exorcism. But even that didn't seem to help. To this day, Robert is said to be one of the most haunted objects in the world and is kept locked away in a museum. Another story is that of Annabelle, a doll that is said to be possessed by a demon. Her owners, a mother and daughter, began to experience strange and terrifying events in their home, such as shaking beds, moving objects, and disembodied voices. They eventually took Annabelle to a priest who performed an exorcism, but he was unable to banish the demon from the doll. Annabelle is now on display at the Occult Museum in New Jersey, where visitors report feeling uneasy and experiencing strange phenomena. And then there's the story of Billy, a doll whose origins are unknown. He was found in a box of donated items, and when the new owner brought him home, strange things started to happen. He would move around on his own, shake people's hands, and even interact with other objects in the house. The new owner, a young girl, became terrified and threw Billy out in the backyard, where he remains buried to this day. These are just a few of the many stories of haunted dolls that have come to life and caused chaos in the real world. Some people might dismiss these stories as mere folklore, but those who have experienced paranormal activity firsthand know that they are very real and terrifying. So if you ever come across a creepy doll in an antique shop or at a yard sale, be careful. You might be bringing home more than you bargained for. And remember, if a doll starts moving by itself, don't call Ghostbusters. Call me.